Elden Ring DLC Shadow of the Archery releasing soon, I have been in a huge Souls-like mood and got to thinking, what if Nintendo made a Legend of Zelda Souls-like? And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's get into it. So for starters, obviously, realistically, a Souls-like Zelda game will more than likely never happen as Nintendo strives to make their games as easily accessible as possible, and Souls-like games are basically the opposite of that. However, it is still fun to speculate what could be. Starting off, I think that the way the world is structured would have to be changed. Now, I'm not saying it couldn't be open world. I mean, look at Elden Ring. It's an open world game while still having a pretty clear path to take, and to an extent, that is what any Souls-like game needs. Linearity to a certain degree. The world of Hyrule would also be much likely be much more dark and more grim, similar to the Souls-like games. Now let's talk about the combat and weapons in the game. For starters, despite FromSoft's Souls games having a plethora of weapons to choose from, I think it would be cooler if Link started off with a weakened Master Sword and had to slowly grow its power as you progressed. We'll talk about that specifically a little later on. Now, despite the Master Sword being the only weapon, what if it had an entire skill tree that you could level up to gain more abilities for the legendary sword, like beams of light that can shoot out like the blasters in Star Wars? Now let's go ahead and talk about the bosses. I think that having a crazy and much more grim versions of classic Zelda bosses would be awesome and would be a great way to still remind you that you're playing a Zelda game. In Souls games, the bosses are almost always the toughest parts of the game, and in this case, it wouldn't be any different. Let's talk story. Typically, the story in Souls games is not handed to the player, and instead you have to go searching for it. However, I think it'd be cooler to have a more classic form of Zelda storytelling where every so often there is a new story beat further progressing the narrative. Just sitting here, I've come up with a basic outline of what the story could follow, so be warned. It's no Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. The game would start off with a cutscene effectively filling the player in on what's happening before the game started. This would include Ganondorf taking over and permanently plunging the kingdom into darkness as he's always wanted to do. Link would be a young man surviving in an abandoned and desecrated village with his uncle who has raised him since he was young. However, when the game starts and the tutorial concludes, the game would throw its very first boss at you, killing Link's uncle and severely injuring Link, serving as the main motivation for why Link decides to go out into this new, severely scarred Hyrule. Along the way, at some point, Link would find the Master Sword, and that's when the game would really start. Again, that was just something I came up with on the fly, so if one of you watching would like to fill in the rest, feel free. Anyways, that's all for this video, as I don't want it to be too terribly long, and as I have to edit it all. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see a part 2 to this video, let's get to 15 likes. With all that being said, farewell.